and welcome to the Huddle Breakdown with me, Laura Bradburn. I am joined as always by Alan and James. James, I'll come to you first. I have brought some kind of lurgy back from your homeland. I do blame the kind of snot-nosed children surrounding me at Disney World, but I don't know. Should I be blaming it on Trump?
I blame it on the people of the United Kingdom and Scotland. Why? I saw somebody, one of our subscribers, Tony, posted that he's in Mexico. And I'm like, my God, if I lived in Scotland, I would not be flying all the way to Mexico to get to a beach or a resort or whatever. Like, to me, it's like, you know how close you are to the Greek Isles and offshore Turkey? Like, I know a lot of people, you know, obviously go to those places, and people like changes and that kind of stuff. I get it. But aren't you closer to Paris? Go to freaking Disney Paris or something. What the hell are you going to Florida for?
Have you been to Paris recently? I think I said about that.
Not recently. Yeah, it's been about almost 10 years. Yeah.
I maybe been a little bit harsh. Alan, is Paris worth a visit for you?
Paris is absolutely incredible. And by the way, you can swim in the Seine now. So James is right. You don't even need to go to, if you want the full kind of holiday experience, including swimming, get over to Paris
in the Seine.
Jump in the river. Yeah, jump in the Seine.
My.
It's been closed to swimming since 1923 due to pollution, and now it's clean enough. They say it's clean enough to swim in. So get yourself in there. Paris is an incredible city. I mean, it's one of my favorites. So I'd be definitely going there instead of Mexico. Or the US for that matter. I mean, to be honest with you, the weather that we're having now, thanks to climate change and all that, you might as well go to the west coast of Scotland or something, or east coast of Scotland and St Andrews and go on the sand dunes or whatever. You'll have a cracking time.
I'll be honest.
It's too hot to go to Spain. It's like 40 degrees. I mean,
yeah,
you can survive that.
I'll be honest, Alan, I don't think clean enough to swim in should be considered an invitation. It's like saying food is edible. It's like, it's not exactly a come and get me plea from the Seine. But anyway, great holiday. Copious amounts of food eaten. Thankfully, numerous steps walked as well, trying to get my nephew a autograph off of Goofy or something like that. It was as magical as they claim it is in the adverts. But that being said, I was trying to keep on top of everything that was going on, not only on the Huddle Breakdown, but with Celtic in general. Before we get to the Celtic news, I just wanted to say to you guys, I thought it was incredibly rude of you to upgrade on me in the way that you have done with the 2 episodes that went out while I've been off. If anybody hasn't listened to those, the guys talked to Jonathan Wilson, the great Jonathan Wilson, who is journalist and host of Alan's favourite podcast. Well, favourite podcast that he doesn't appear on, obviously. It was what it was. And then they did 2 crossover episodes with the Celtic Underground guys, who are long-standing stalwarts of the Celtic podcasting game. James, great content from all of you over that couple of weeks, and just an example of exactly what people can expect on the huddlebreakdown.com.
Yeah, they were both fun, and that's where we keep trying to be somewhat creative in doing some new things. So hopefully have a lot more of that in store as we go forward. But yeah, when I'm tempted to, I never listen back, by the way. I can't, as with, I think the majority of the Celtic support, I can't stand the sound of my own voice. So I was tempted to listen back to the Jonathan Wilson one because of how good he was. But, and it's hard when you're in the middle of recording something, like you're trying to think up your next question, that kind of stuff. So sometimes you miss some stuff, but yeah, no, it's been good, and thanks to producer Andy. He's been working behind the scenes on trying to help us get some of these guests. So shout out to him.
Yeah, big shout out to producer Andy. I kind of somewhat disrespectfully call him Backroom Andy, which I'm not sure he enjoys, but it was meant to be a compliment. But he does work tirelessly behind the scenes to make us look somewhat professional, which sometimes we do. Alan, I know you particularly enjoyed talking to Jonathan Wilson. He was you're a big admirer of his, and for good reason. He's been a guy who's been a writer for a number of years, but was one of the first adopters of the podcasting space, and effectively so. How was it finally getting to sit down with him for a good chat?
He's great. I mean, he's a lovely guy. I mean, you never know what you're going to get. But he was really good natured, very patient. And as I say, sadly, I had an appointment. I think he would have talked for 2-3 hours if we'd let him. He's brilliant. So, and he's also a great example of what's happening in this space, really, in terms of he is a proper, I think, qualified, experienced journalist. He's an author. He's written many excellent books on the history of football, especially, and he's a world expert on South American football, Eastern European football, especially. He'll tell you, I mean, basically everything to do with football was, tactically wise, was invented in Hungary and Austria. He'll tell you great length about all that. And yet, because of the way that the industry is going in terms of the traditional print media, he's finding himself increasingly diversifying into his own kind of projects, including as I say, It Was What It Was, which is actually part of Gary Neville's the Overlap stable. But don't let that put you off; it is excellent. A lot of the Overlap stuff is really good, to be fair. And then there's another one that started called Libero, which is a collection of what I would consider to be the best sort of serious football writers in the country, getting together, just blethering about whatever the hot topics are of the day. And it's a rolling cast of contributors, that one, but that one was really good as well. I just love all that stuff. I mean, when I grew up, I immersed myself in books by the likes of Hugh McIlvanney and Brian Glanville about the history of the European Cup and how it all started. So all this, if you start talking to me about great Hungarian clubs of the 30s or Albanian football in the 20s, I just love all that. So I want to know what kits they were wearing and what the stadiums were called, and see all the stats and the tables and the pictures, look at the crowds. I just find it all fascinating because I'm a sort of social historian, geographer by training, so I find all that stuff really interesting in terms of trying to understand how we've got to where we are today and understanding the history of football tactics, for example. So, yeah, it's all good stuff. And as James says, we're trying to get some interesting guests for the subscribers as well. And the Celtic Underground one was my thanks to Harry and the team for accepting the invitation to do that. I like to think we're a podcast that seeks to collaborate with other Celtic podcasts. I'm sick of so many people that seem to think it's okay just to slag off other people that are doing stuff. We'd rather be collaborative and encourage and be hopefully give a slightly different audience maybe to some of the other people that are producing great stuff as well. So yeah, but in terms of how that went, please give us your comments, in the comment section as well. Really interested to know how the subscribers and what have you felt about it.
Yeah, no, absolutely brilliant. Speaking of the Overlap stable, I noticed in the paper that Roy Keane and Ian Wright both appeared in Glasgow for John Clark's funeral, which I thought was a big mark of the man's standing, because even players who, in their case, weren't with the club for long, obviously were hugely impacted by his presence. And that said, I think certainly the first time I've been on the podcast since that news broke. Alan, I'll come to you first on that one. Sad news, obviously, and just a reminder of the irrepressible marching forward of time and the fact that we're losing more and more of these greats. But John Clark, perhaps more than any other, has been such a servant to the club, not only as a player but in the many years after, being I think most know him as a kit man, but I think he's done a variety of jobs in the club, and certainly if you're going to talk about a Tommy Burns or a Paul McStay or anybody who somebody would consider a true Celtic man, John Clark's certainly in that conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's going to be 60 years in a couple of years' time since anniversary of Lisbon, obviously. So it is, it is a long time ago, and sadly, that can only mean one thing. So yeah, it's very sad. I mean, the service that John gave to the club is just immense over a hugely long period of time to be associated. I think if you're a professional, in whatever capacity, if you're finding yourself being useful, being contributing effectively loyalty to a professional football club for that length of time in a professional capacity, that speaks volumes for you as a person as well, I think, in terms of your ability to get on with people, to get things done, to be someone that's trusted, well regarded, and so forth. And as a Celtic man, he's right up there, one of the greats for sure.
Yeah, James, it's very easy for us, and we've obviously seen the same thing happen with the tragic passing of Diogo Jota this week, but it's very easy as Celtic or as football fans to only appreciate the person from the footballing point of view. But I think what's clear from what I've seen of the coverage of John Clark is just how great of a man he was, and obviously a family man and all that kind of thing. But we can only appreciate from the football inside the service that he gave, and the kind of what that says about his personality, that he showed the loyalty and obviously the work ethic to be involved with Celtic for as long as he was.
Yeah, I think the irony with Clark is that he was such a giant as a person. He was so highly regarded and justifiably so, that I think he played on such a great team that has so much kind of narrative and legend built around it. It seems to me he was probably materially undervalued as a player. I mean, I think. I theorized that, and we did, the one show, the special where we covered the final in '67, and Alan's captured the data as best he could and all that stuff. And I think if we went back and applied modern analytics to that team in that period, it wouldn't surprise me if he's right near the top as far as the quote unquote best player in that side. I mean, the job he was doing and the totality and how good he was at different things. And aligned with that, my favorite stories that's been retold and kind of come out again is the one with Pele, and coming into the elevator, and the idea that Pele would remember him specifically, and by all accounts, Clark did a tremendous job marking him and neutralizing him, the great Pele, and the one opportunity that they had to play against one another. So I think that speaks to, he wasn't flashy. He wasn't the guy who was scoring goals. He wasn't jinky doing all the taking guys on, dribbling and all that stuff, which obviously would, attract affection, and justifiably so. But he did a lot of the dirty work, and was really good on the ball too. So I just wanted to mention that because I think his greatness as a human being may have overshadowed how great of a footballer he actually was.
Yeah, I think you're entirely right. I think obviously as Celtic supporters we can all name the Lisbon Lions, but the high profile ones in that team that come to mind are obviously Billy McNeil, Tommy Gemo and Stevie Chalmers as the goal scorers, and Jimmy Johnston, even Bobby Murdoch, who's seen as the connoisseur's choice, if you like, of that team, gets his fair amount of praise, I would say. But John Clark doesn't get as much praise as I think he should, from what I've seen anyway, and what I've heard from people who were around to watch him play. So a sad loss, but to see him be celebrated in the way he has been since that news came through has been heartwarming, to say the least. And obviously the thoughts of everybody at Huddle Breakdown are with those who are most closely affected by it, which is obviously his family and close friends. We'll move on to more modern happenings at the club at the moment. We have been back in pre-season action. James, I'll come to you first. We have not started in the rip-roaring free-scoring way that we like to do. Yeah, and a 1-0 victory over Queen's Park has been the slightly underwhelming start to our season. I didn't see the game because I was out of the country, but I'm saying that to you. You did see the game and you were in the same country I was in, so I don't know why that's relevant, but yeah. Anyway, what did you make of what you saw in the game? Did you learn anything from it that you maybe didn't know at the end of last season, or is there anything we can take from it going into the upcoming fixtures?
Yeah, not so much probably from a Celtic perspective. Made me think Queen's Park's probably going to get relegated, or they have a fair shot at getting relegated in the championship this season. So But yeah, it's always good to see the level of involvement with youth players, even if it's this early in preseason. You kind of get some sense of some of the names. Although I have to say, my one gripe is that the team sheet that came out didn't have player numbers on it. And I know that's not always a necessity, but it made it harder to figure out who was. As I was watching it on an iPad, it was not easy to kind of keep track of who was doing what, especially when a bunch of them start with 6 or the double-digit high number ones. But no, I thought the other part, it probably stood out, and this is more so from a profile perspective of our younger players, is not a lot of size, not a lot of like explosive athleticism. None really jumped off the page to me, so to speak, as far as wow, the wow factor, where you kind of get that explosive movement, that kind of thing. But yeah, no, I chalk it up to my guess is we probably won't see a lot of those guys this season in any meaningful, particularly given the proclivities of how Rodgers has managed the team since his return.
Even with our new player pathway manager or whatever the title is.
Well, apparently he's been hired just to find out where Inamura can go out on loan. I don't know. We'll see. But that'll come along. That conversation will come along a little bit.
Yeah, it certainly will. We'll get to that. Alan, did you manage to see any of the game? And if so, what did you make of it?
So yes, I'll be honest. So I watched it on my phone after I'd been out. So it was quite late. So it wasn't the best. It wasn't the most analytically focused viewing experience, I have to say. And no, I haven't gone back and watched it again. But I was thinking back, actually, because we played Queen's Park at the beginning of last season on a similar basis in the same stadium with a team that had a sprinkling of experienced players. And by the way, I was absolutely delighted to see Callum McGregor get some minutes. I mean, if the Celtic squad needs one thing, it's Callum McGregor to get a good run out at Queen's Park. So that was good. So and last season, if you remember, we beat Queen's Park 6-4 in an absolutely chaotic game. Kyogo scored a hat trick. I think O got one, Turley got one, and but we also looked really, really vulnerable at the back. And so I think if you just want to do it on a comparative basis, this game was like Celtic clearly had almost complete control of the ball throughout the game. So, in terms of the younger players adapting to that game model, that was kind of good, actually, a positive, I would say. What struck me really was the lack of depth in the forward areas. That was the thing that really struck me. I thought the midfielders were tidy but unadventurous. I thought the forwards really, really short in the forward areas amongst those players that were using. And like James, I couldn't tell if there were 5s or 6s on the back and they didn't have names, so I lost track of who was who. I vaguely remember McArdle playing deeper and actually doing quite well in a deeper role, and so that's one to look out for maybe. I do wonder if Dane Murray will be given a chance and a run in the team effectively as Carter Vickers' kind of deputy, and I wouldn't actually be averse to that. I think he looks like he's a big guy as well, and he looks kind of comfortable and silky on the ball to me, so I'd be quite okay with that. But it's really the forward areas. Nobody else, I can't even remember any of the other names that certainly didn't stand out to me particularly. I judged them on 45 minutes, but it's not fair anyway. But you'd like to think they'd make an impression. I think what I was disappointed about was the number of players that were getting the ball in like forward areas and then just simply passing it back. There seemed to be very little risk taking, very little example of players saying, right, this is my chance, I'm going to really have a go at this. Even if I screw up, I'm going to have a go at it and take a player on and try and do something a bit creative, a bit crazy. I'd just like to have seen a bit more of that, I guess. So, obviously it doesn't really tell us a huge amount, but for me, maybe the McArdle playing deeper, Murray, and the lack of forward options, they were the sort of 3 takeaways for me.
Yeah, so I was just wondering whether your slightly inebriated state of watching it suggested that you maybe came out of it thinking Johnny Kenny was the best since Larson. But
it's a good finish. It was a good finish. A tremendous left foot finish, to be fair to the kid. But I just don't see with us signing this Osmond lad from Fulham. I just don't. And Kenny was okay when he in his minutes at the end of last season, but it was nothing amazing, I guess, if that's fair. But So I do wonder what his future holds.
Yeah, it's a strange one. Callum Osmond has obviously been confirmed. Benjamin Nigren has been confirmed as a signing, and Hayato Inamura has been confirmed as a signing. We are also rumoured to be after a Japanese forward, if I can remember the name. Let me just see if I can find it here.
Yamada.
Yamada. Yeah.
Yeah.
Shin
Yamada.
Yamada, as well as Giuseppe Ambrosino from Napoli. Lots of names flying around. Alan, I'll come back to you in this first because you actually raised it when we were putting the pre-show together. What's your opinion on this kind of discussion around the signings? Because as always in pre-season, there are varying opinions about the quality of the signings that either we've made or that we're linked to. Where do you stand on some of the stuff that you're seeing people say about it and the kind of general feeling around it?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's certain sort of Aunt Sally's, if you like, and this will be true in any support, I'm sure, where it doesn't matter what the club or anyone else does, you'll find a way to shift the narrative to be able to throw a rock at that particular Aunt Sally. So whether it's Peter Lowell, whether it's Dermot Desmond, whether it's the board in general, whether it's Brendan Rodgers, whether it's whatever it might be, there'll be a tendency amongst all of us probably to some extent of shifting a narrative towards, wanting everyone to throw rocks at that particular target. And I think there's a bit of that. I'm a bit surprised at the level of dissatisfaction, let's put it that way, that seems to be, in certain WhatsApp groups and, online in general sort of thing. And I think there's a lot of comments about Celtic, usual stuff about, oh, they're not doing anything, get your finger out, sign somebody, all that bollocks. And it's like, yeah, I get that. We're all kind of want everything yesterday, but we've signed quite a few players. Before the end of June, we'd signed quite a few players, and we hadn't signed anyone by the 16th of July last season, and we signed a backup goalkeeper on the 16th of July, right? Now, I know we didn't have a European qualifier, but that European qualifier is like the fourth game of the season and the sixth game of the season. So, I wouldn't be panicking quite yet. And also, before the end of the financial year and the end of June, when players' contracts typically run out, that's when you should be picking up the bargains. That's when you should be picking up the Bosmans or the players that are running their contract down and doing all that. And I think we did a nice job with Nigren. We got Tierney in. We sorted out the third choice goalkeeper. I mean, that's just a bit of housekeeping that needs to be done. We got another young kid, I think, from Morton, who's very highly regarded, not one for the first team. So, I think Inamura is the one that perhaps triggered a lot of people. But again, I come back to, we have conversations where we say the club should be doing the Moneyball thing. It should be looking at leagues less scouted, should be looking at the second division in here and the third division here and finding hidden gems and not paying a lot of money for them and then, and all that, which is kind of what Inamura is. It's kind of, what Osmond is, rescued for. He's not played a league, not played a first team game yet, and I think that surely directionally that's the right way to be going. And I come back to, we can't just be doing that. Sometimes you do need a 30-year-old centre half because that just is, that value has presented itself in the marketplace, that a particular player with a particular skill set that you're lacking is available. Yes, he's quite expensive. No, he's not got any resale value. But if he guides you through the Champions League qualifier and gets you an extra couple of points away from home by organising a defence, it's probably worth it, right? So it doesn't discount that sort of signing, and it doesn't discount occasionally going, we'll spend somewhere between 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 million on a player. So all of those things are in play for me as legitimate ways for the club to do business. But at the end of the day, it comes back to, is it good value? Is it value for money for the club, etc.? And we don't know with the players that we've signed so far, but I don't think I've seen anything yet that I'm willing to kind of lose, as James would say, set my what hair I do have on fire yet. The only thing that's concerned me slightly is Rodgers' comments on Inamura, and we can touch on that. That's fair. That's fair. But then again, a manager in the last year of his contract, the club doesn't have to be signing players to satisfy Brendan Rodgers all the time. Sometimes they're signing players for the good of the club in the longer term. And we've talked about this. We've said that's how grown-up football clubs operate. Some of these signings aren't for Brendan Rodgers. Some of them are for the long-term future of the club. So all of these things, and that's none of this is to be happy clapping. None of this is to, deny all the conversations we've had on this podcast about the role of Dermot Desmond, the risk averse nature of the board, the lack of joined up coherent thinking. All these things are still probably true and under debate. But I'm not quite sure why the level of dissatisfaction that I'm seeing. I suppose that's where I'm trying to come from.
Yeah, James, to put a bit more context around some of the concerns around the signing of Hayato Inamura, for anybody who hasn't been on top of it, I'm sure everybody will have. He's a Japanese centre-half signed from Albirex Niigata, who has made 15 starts, 17 total appearances this season for Niigata, who finished second bottom of the J-League. When asked about him starting and whether he would be ready to go straight into the first team earlier this week, Rodgers said no, he won't be. He's part of an investment for the club. He'll be assessed during pre-season to see where he's at as a young player, and then it's whether he stays with the squad or whether he goes out on loan. Now, I think the base facts that I've given there about Inamura weren't particularly exciting anyway, but to have the manager, to have the club, announce him in the way that they would announce any signing, with all the new pictures on social media and the statement saying they're delighted to sign him and all that kind of stuff. And then the manager come out and basically immediately say he's not going to be a main feature for the first team. I can see where the concern comes from some from some fans, especially when you consider we've got a history of doing this. As I'm speaking to you, I'm thinking of Manny Perez and Andrew Gutman from a few years ago. They're names that not many people remember, but like the type of players who have been signed who you think, I don't know what the purpose was behind that, I don't know what the plan was for those players, and Inamura strikes me a little bit as one of those. What's your opinion on making signings of that nature? As Alan says, they can't always be for Brendan Rodgers when he's in the last year of his contract. What's your opinion on signings like that and their place? And do Celtic supporters have a right to be concerned when they hear that kind of talk coming from the manager?
That's the most disturbing part of all of this, is the specific comments that Rodgers made, at least for me, because to me it echoed of the and the two names that you brought up, Laura, who I remember now that you mentioned them. And actually, Gutman's gone on to be a pretty productive fullback in MLS. So I always kind of come across his name and go, "Oh man, he's still playing! Like, oh, he's here now! Like he's gone around quite a bit as a fullback in MLS." But the name that rung true to me right away as soon as I heard this comment, I was like, "Holy crap! This is another Marian Shved."
Marian Shved moment.
Yeah, the Marian Shved moment, and certainly, that's like a PTSD moment with the way he left last time, and what
was it he said? He basically said, "I don't need another winger" or something like that. Yeah,
Well, he said you'll have to ask the club about that one. We've got millions of wingers. And that was not the start of season 2?
Yes.
No, was it?
I think it was. Or do you know?
You carry on, James. I'll check. I'll check in the background. You carry on.
Yeah. I thought he was the same window as the Weah and Burke loan signings. So I think that was immediately preceding him departing, I thought. But I might be off a year.
He was gone within weeks. He was gone within weeks, wasn't he?
Yeah,
it was the January, and he was gone by the kind of before the end of February.
3 weeks later, yeah. So I throw my hands up. Like, that's not a rational, analytical point to make. It's bringing up the the confirmation bias of that one. It's all relative, traumatic. A comment that he made within the timeline of his departure. And that obviously occurred after kind of the prior summer had been widely reported to have been a bit of a mess between him and Lawwell. So I think there are some uncomfortable parallels here, meaning that I don't think that the windows have unfolded in a healthy way since his return, with the first window being a complete debacle. I think relative to Alan's comments, so I think we have like we have two confirming relatively recent past that are triggering everyone to try to and kind of get really anxious here. So one is that window, the Mark Lawwell window, where we signed, I don't know, we spent like 20 million on nobody, basically. We effectively got no first team players out of all of the Jota money. That's kind of the way that people anchor it mentally. And now we start seeing some of these guys get signed again that are, the cheap, the punt. You get all the characterizations that people will use. And I think that's framed largely or materially off of that window. I'm not saying it's accurate or a good analysis, so to speak, but I get it. Like, I get why people would kind of fly off onto that. And then I think with these comments from Rodgers, and again, I'll throw my hands up, it definitely triggered me emotionally. It was, it's pretty clear that this was not I think it's reasonable to conclude that this was not a joined up signing. I mean, there's a joined up signing where Rodgers or the manager would say, oh, well, this is part of the plan. The club's doing this. It's to be expected. I don't think he characterizes it the way he does in those comments, which is basically, I don't know anything about this guy. We'll see what he looks like when he gets here, and then we'll deal with it. Like, that's kind of how I took the comment. That's different than, I'm part of the process of identifying talent acquisitions. Looks pretty good to me. He's not quite ready yet. I get the strategic situation of doing this, that kind of thing. So that's where I think part of the kind of crazy overwrought reactions that we're getting and the anxiety are part of those from those two recent precedents. The other part is, I think there's a growing anxiety about, hey, we might actually face some competition this season. I mean, I think there's some of that too, which is, the changes across the city, and then even to a lesser degree, I think for most supporters with what's going on at Hearts. So I think, you kind of put that all into a nice paella. You get a nice mix. That's how we're getting this growing anxiety. And I'll throw my hands up again too. I've been anxious really since February about this upcoming season, not specifically about
we could tell, James.
Well, because I see a growing list of risks that are making me a bit concerned. But any one of these specifically, I don't think are necessarily problematic. But when you start piling these things together with all the other things going on, I get why people are growing more anxious.
Yeah, Alan, it doesn't help me when I look at your Twitter timeline and see you have a brief look at statistics for the potential other Japanese signing coming up, Shin Yamada, that don't cover him in glory either. I guess my because I am more on the side of some of the people that are showing concern, much to everybody's shock, I'm sure. But I think what concerns me more about it is what James touched upon there, is that Brendan Rodgers isn't even willing to cover the club in any way, shape or form. He's not willing to pretend like he's got any input to this, or pretend that he's in any way involved in these signings. And to me, that concerns me from the point of view of if he's willing to say that publicly, what kind of conversations are going on behind the scenes about what the strategy is. What's your opinion on...
Laura, real quick, then, the other elephant in the room here is, well, then who the hell is making that decision?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the other part, I think, within the support that's anxiety driving was, is it Tisdale? Is it some hodgepodge of the board? Is it Dermot Desmond? Like, I'm not saying it's any of those specific. I'm just saying, but without some kind of transparency of, who's making this kind of decision, because we know it's not Rodgers. I mean, I think it's clear. So sorry to interrupt.
No, that was the point I was kind of getting to, Alan. Is like, is it a case of one for the club, one for Rodgers, do you think, in the way that they're doing things? Or is that too simplistic a way to look at it, as I'm sure it is?
I imagine. So, firstly, let me just clarify my position, because I know how these things go, right? So, Number one, I'm always concerned. That's just my default position, and I'm always skeptical. So don't want people to get the wrong impression there. It's just that I'm not kind of running around with my hair on fire yet. And I say yet because, I agree with James and yourself. Rodgers' comments were very concerning. I always look at these situations exactly as James did, laid out very well there, and think what was not being said. Right? I always think about what isn't being said, and all the things that Rodgers could have said about, I know he's 23. You got to think of him as a young player, and we see immense upsides to him, but it'll take him a while to settle. If he'd said all those things, he could have still have made the point that it's maybe one for the future, not for him now, without sort of. Just throwing anyone under the bus, really, and he chose not to go down that path. So that is a concern because we have been here before, and it didn't end well, and it unravelled very quickly. So that is a massive flag. I completely accept that. My comments previously were more geared towards I'm not yet I'm not yet concerned about the players that we have signed. Because I think I can see sense in all of them to some extent, and I think it's right that we continue to. And it's unfortunate that spend 2, 3, 4 million on a sort of younger player that you've not heard of is seen as now the sort of Mark Lowell model, when it's always been the club's model, and it always should be a part of the club's transfer model. And I say apart deliberately because, again, there are other value streams, other value profiles out there, not just this sort of 2 to 3 million one. So hopefully that clarified my position. I suspect the club are just carrying on working in the way that they see is most effective for Celtic, and not listening to any of the outside noise. And in a sense, that's what a well-run business should do, other than the fact that we know that, as James says, we're not convinced, and some would go a lot further than that the club is running its recruitment model on a modern, efficient basis. And even if there were talented people within the recruitment team, which there may well be, we don't know a lot about Paul Tisdale yet and the impact he's had. There's almost like a high level, power of all-seeing individual who can kind of scupper things for better or for worse. Even if the recruitment team are doing a good job, it can all get thrown out the water. So all those concerns, I think, are still in play, and I accept that. But it's too early to be declaring defeat, I think, in the transfer window. I suspect as well, we haven't, although mentally we've all said goodbye to Nicholas Kuhn. He hasn't actually signed for Como yet. The club doesn't actually have the transfer income booked on their accounts yet, so that probably will change the dynamic a little bit in terms of some of the areas that Celtic may look to strengthen in. So listen, there's still, we start our first games at the beginning of August, isn't it? We're probably about, nearly a month away, I suppose, to that first game. So I'm not panicking. A lot of business doesn't get done till late, and that's because good players have options and they want to see how those options play out before they make their choices. It's always easy to buy bad players early in the window because nobody else wants them and their clubs don't want them and they're not difficult to do business with. So remember that as well. So, all my concerns, see other pods, are still there, but as I say, I'm not throwing anyone under the bus quite yet.
Yeah, James, one thing that I think we can praise the club for at the moment, Alan mentioned that it's not been confirmed yet, but Nicholas Kuhn is on the verge of a move to Como. Gustav Lagerbielke is on the verge of a move to Braga. Mike Nawrocki has been confirmed as having signed for Hannover 96 in Germany. So without being too disrespectful to some of the players mentioned, one of the problems Celtic have always had is getting rid of some of the deadwood or the extremities of the squad who are taking up either a wage or a registration spot or something like that we could be using more valuably. You just hope that we are inefficiently getting rid of some of these players as we have done, that we are going to use the money wisely. The other one being obviously that it looks like potentially the big money sale this summer might be Daizen Maeda. Is it a case of trying to get those players confirmed as having left as early as possible so that, as Alan says, we can move on to getting players in who are of a good standard later on in the window?
Yeah, I think that's been one of my criticisms, one of my many, relative to the player recruitment and how things have been managed. Is it seems like there's almost like a checklist of process that gets done relative to how these windows are managed. Other than, and that's what made them stand out so much. It was under the Ange era when him and his agent seemed to kind of take over things to some degree. And I get why you'd want to make sure that the sale is booked with Kuhn before you go on and spend that money. Like if the plan is, okay, we have a net, surplus trading model, meaning that even though, we just buy as a discipline, we want to make money most windows or all windows, but we want to sell more than what we're spending and to make that a profit generator, which I actually advocate. Like, I think that's good player trading models do that. They have the discipline of kind of constantly generating resources to reinvest and do that systematically. But that, there's a risk aversion to that. I mean, that not every summer's market dynamics are the same. The ones around COVID were nuts. There's a lot of weird things going on. And I just think, we get caught. It seems like we get caught and I thought last summer's transfer window was, maybe the best or worst example of that, depending on one's perspective. I would call it the worst example, is bad negotiating situations where, you almost become a fish in a barrel, like we were late in the window. People knew we had to sign certain profiles of players, meaning positional profiles, that we were short because of the departure of O'Reilly in midfield, and that we basically needed a striker. Well, we saw how that played out, where again, regardless of what one thinks of Ida and Engels, I think it's kind of common knowledge at this point that the prices that were paid were way above what their probably going market rate was. So I get concerned more so because I agree with Alan. Like, there's plenty of time here. There's plenty of opportunity to be smart and to acquire the squad players that we need. But I'm just not. You mentioned that Maeda might be one of, if not the biggest signing theoretically of the summer. I have no confidence that the club's going to be proactive and strategic in moving him on in an orderly way that would make him happy, and then reinvest and have like a squad management timeline where they say, okay, well, this window we should be selling this number of players, and this, they've been here 2 seasons or 3 seasons, so this is like some forward planning and how this pathway should be managed. So I'm still in the let me see it first before I have any kind of confidence that it'll happen. But and I don't really have a strong sense yet. The other, as Alan and I have talked about really over the last 2 seasons, is that other than higher quality young players being inflated in price, which gets tough for us as a club. I mean, if we're looking to shop in that 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old demographic, the fact that prices there have just exploded makes it hard to identify quality there for a reasonable price. Outside of that dynamic, like, I don't have a good sense yet what this window is looking like, as far as like where buying and selling is going on, and who's kind of winning transactions, that kind of thing. And that's because the volumes haven't really picked up. You have just like in seasons you have World Cup, they tend to be later, or Euros. With this dopey Club World Cup, it seems like things are being kind of delayed there too. So we'll get more of a sense. But again, I don't have a lot of confidence yet that we're going to navigate it adeptly, and we're more in the box checking exercise.
Talking of the market dynamics that you're talking about and how a single transfer can affect things so massively like that, the two that always spring to mind for me are when Liverpool sold Fernando Torres and then massively overpaid for Andy Carroll because Newcastle saw them coming. They had 50 million burning a hole in their pocket, and they were like, well, it's a bargain if we get a replacement for less than 50 million, and then end up paying 30 odd million for Andy Carroll that he was never worth. The other one being the weirdest summer transfer I can ever remember was when Neymar went to PSG for 222 million, and then suddenly bang average players were going for like near 100 million, and I just was like, this is crazy. Speaking of those kind of market dynamics though, and Alan, we talked about this a bit before the pod started. James quite rightly says that, you know, with Ida and with Engels, that some Celtic supporters will perhaps feel that we've overpaid for him. He then made the point that general market is overinflated. My concern is that we have paid the going rate for a player of that ability. It's just that we can't operate in that market, and unfortunately it is going to be 10 to 15 million for what we would now consider quite an average player, especially when you consider, as it was announced yesterday, Kyogo has signed for Birmingham City for 10 million. Before anybody jumps on my back, I'm not saying he's an average player. I'm saying Birmingham, as a newly promoted championship side, are able to go out and spend 10 million on a striker who has not had a great 6 months at his previous club. And so therefore we would be operating at best at lower championship level financially, if not top of League One for players. What's your thoughts on that whole dynamics conversation and where we sit in terms of who we can afford to buy, never mind who we can actually attract to the club?
So Celtic were rumoured to be spending £10 million on a player from Rennes who's 30 years old and can't get a game. What would we be thinking? We'd be horrified, wouldn't we? But actually, if you scout the player and know the player, it may well be an absolute bargain. And this is the trick. This is why it isn't easy. You know, it's not just about the data; it's about the situation, the contract situation, the value, how much they're being paid, etc. So all of those things, you know, the person, all has to be taken into consideration. But yeah, both the things that, you know, can be true at the same time. What, you know, in terms of the market's getting hotter for certain age groups, especially younger players, and Celtic were dreadfully mismanaged in how they negotiated those particular deals. I think both those things are true at the same time. It's why I'm kind of heartened, because Celtic seem to be shopping in this market of players that are a little bit older, say 21 to 23, let's say, roughly 24 maybe, who've kind of maybe had a move, not worked out, maybe gone down a level or two, and now we're starting to kind of blossom. I like that market. I think there's the value in that market. So I don't mind us shopping in that market. But again, you know, if we had a really aggressively modern scouting department, if you look at the lad that was lots of rumours around today around this Isaksson, who's at Rapid Vienna, Swedish winger, and the price they say that they want 10 million for him. The price could be sort of 8-9 something like that million for this kid, who in 2024 you could have signed from the Spanish second division for 250 grand. Well, to me, a smart club will buy him from the second division for 250 grand when he was 21, not 9 million when he was 23, right? Now, I'm not saying Celtic won't get a really good player for 23, because, you know, they may well do, and if this comes off, I don't know. But I'm just saying, this is idealistically, you want to be spotting those players when they're playing for an undervalued team in a lower league for a very low amount of money. That's the sort of the magic Tony Bloom database, which whilst it's incredibly secret and well guarded and unknown to us in terms of, I'm sure it contains all the things that the StatsBomb database does. It probably contains an awful lot more indicators that would allow you to align a player's capabilities to particular roles and particular styles of play to make determinations on, you know, they may not be the best at X, but if you put them in your team doing this role, then actually there's some sweet spots there. It's that level of precision. And that I suspect, I don't know, I suspect their database allows you to do, rather than just give me all the left wingers that are really fast and 6 foot tall and can cross the ball with the right foot. You know, you'll get a decent list, right? And you might even get some of the gems, but you by the time you filter it down to 5, you know, there's a lot of noise and there, and a lot of opinion and so forth that will have muddied the water. So I think we're still a million miles away from we should be getting this guy at 250,000 from the Spanish second division. But I don't have a problem with us looking at the Negrins, etc. Even as we've talked about the Inamuras to an extent. I mean, this is kind of where we got Kuhn from. This is kind of where we got Carter Vickers from. This is the sort of market that we got Jota from. So there is value. There's genuine value to be had there as well. It's not just about unearthing them when they're 16, 17. Yes, we should be doing a lot better at that as well. But as I say, at every price point and at every age point, there's a potentially different approach that can be applied, all under the same parameter of: is this value? Is this worth pursuing?
Yeah, it's. I don't envy the job of trying to identify players and keep to a certain financial model in today's market, I have to say, because I think the way that things are inflating seems a bit out of control, especially in that lower end of the market, like you say, for the up and coming younger players. But we shall see if we can get something out of that. James, I think the only remaining question we have before we sign off today is: are you getting one of the Celtic baseball shirts?
Oh boy, I didn't see that question coming, but I actually did put quite a bit of thought into it. I think I've fallen on no, and the reason why is I am a dyed-in-the-wool card-carrying member of the New York Yankees hate club.
Okay.
So I hate the New York Yankees.
Okay.
So
is it too similar to the Yankees?
Well, they're synonymous with pinstripes. They're the one baseball team that is synonymous with pinstripes. So I can't, in good conscience, wear something that's even adjacently aligned with the New York Yankees.
Yeah. Well, even if you don't get that, apparently pre-match jerseys are now a thing worth buying, because we've just announced that, and that looks as mental as anything I think we've ever produced before. I don't know what they're smoking in the Adidas design room, but
cash. They just burn the cash.
Yeah, it's some strong stuff.
Surely,
anyway,
whilst you're actually at the match with your new shiny season ticket, Laura, what you don't appreciate is that the real supporters like us that are watching it on TV will be sitting, before the game with our pre-game jersey on. Then as the match starts, I'll change to the new shiny home kit. Half-time, I'll be putting on my half-time shirt to go out, get my burger, my Bovril, come back. Second half, put on the third kit maybe for the second half. And then when the game's finished, I'll take that off, put on my warm-down shirt, and then do a bit of a warm down, obviously, and then I'll, probably have my, man about town shirt for the evening, maybe.
And don't forget your Celtic jammies.
Celtic jammies, yeah. There you go.
Yeah.
That's,
surely if you're getting
you're not a true fan if you're not doing all that.
Yeah, surely if you're getting the baseball shirt though, James, you have to go hot dog and slice of apple pie at halftime rather than pie and Bovril.
Oh, I'm going to a game later in the month. Somebody's playing the Yankees, so I'll be going there to hate on the Yankees. And I'm going for 2 games with my wife and my daughter. And one of the nights, the first night, is Dollar Dog Night. So you can bet your sweet ass that I will have multiple $1 hot dogs.
Would you be launching them at the Yankees players for $1?
Well,
I mean, why wouldn't you?
I don't want to get thrown out. I try to be civil in that way, Alan. But no, I'll definitely. I might end up coming home with a coronary, but I'll be having multiple $1 dogs.
I don't think I've heard anything more American, having already been in the country for the last 2 weeks, than somebody saying it's Dollar Dog Night. You can bet your sweet ass I'm going to be there. That is great. That is great. And with that said, we will sign off for the week. Obviously, you can expect more from the huddlebreakdown.com, even though we're still in the off-season, to use an American parlance. James and Alan have continued producing. Alan, I don't know if we're going to see you for the next few weeks because you're off on your travels again. But hope you enjoy that. I was going to say I was going to try and keep the fact that I'm now a card carrying season ticket holder low profile so that I wouldn't get attacked on going into the stadium. But you've absolutely screwed that up for me. What I will say is it's likely that I'll be using the same turnstiles as the Green Brigade because I'm sat not too far away from them, so it will be full balaclava and all that. Not only for my own protection, but for theirs as well. So, yeah.
So listen, if anyone's watching who's part of the Brisbane Celtic Sports Club, I believe my son's been to a big bar there. Show me pictures, incredible. Give us a shout in the comments. I'll try and get to one of the because I think there's 5 friendlies when I'm away. Looking to take in an Australian rules football match as well is on the agenda.
That would be awesome.
And this is one that's going to generate a lot of hate for me. But I've actually got tickets to the Lions test against Australia in Brisbane, which is incredible, once in a lifetime.
Yeah.
Dear. So I get a lot of hate for that one, I'm sure. Rugby.
I don't know how attuned you are to the cultural impact of somebody saying they're going to a cricket match, James, but it is not good. I know.
But, certain things.
To be fair, the Australians share that. I think it's way down their list of sports, rugby. I think there's a number of sports that they'll watch before they watch the rugby, which is probably why there was some tickets left.
And here's me thinking
no chance you'll get one for the Australian rules.
Here's me thinking you were on a pilgrimage to go and watch Marco Tellio, but there you go.
Who?
Exactly. Thank you very much, James. Yeah, exactly. Thank you very much, James. Thank you very much, Alan. Thank you very much, everybody, for listening. We will see you again next week.